couple more seats if someone would like to gather. You can also gather around on the side over here as well. My name is Rabbi Etman. I'm the rabbi at Congregation for Me in Los Angeles, and it's an honor to be able to be with you all this morning as we pay tribute to the life of a magnificent person. I certainly know that the family even reflects on how many people are here to pay their respects and their tribute to Jerry as we gather here. It's a pretty profound moment as we take our cracked open hearts and offer the support for those who acutely walk through the valleys of shadows and grief, and for all of us who have a little crack and a little tear in our heart as we begin that beautiful and sacred yet challenging journey of grief and memory. So this morning we'll have an opportunity to hear some words from our Jewish tradition, our faith tradition that can give us a window and a shape and a structure through which we can enter into these moments of grief and bereavement and memory. Then we'll hear some personal words from one of Jerry's daughters. We'll share some reflections of our personal prayers ourselves, and then we will offer up our cracked open hearts in memory. When we remember a person, we have to remember a person with both tears and with laughter. Because if we're only remembering someone with tears, we're only remembering half of a life. And I certainly know Jerry's life was full. And it's certainly this outpouring of support on this chilly morning gives us that ability to be here together, to warm up our hearts and our souls. Dr. Maya Angelou teaches, love arrives as in its trains comes ecstasy, old memories of pleasure, ancient histories of pain. Yet if we are bold, love strikes away the chain of fears from our souls. Our psalmist writes, Shviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimeni balamot. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful one see destruction. You show me a path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our beloved Jerry. Our friends and family grieve in their darkened world. In their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Jerry's love that united us in life in which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness, and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. At this moment in time that we turn our eyes to one of those familiar psalms that many of us know from our Judeo-Christian faith tradition, words that we find on the back of the prayer pamphlet that we received when we came in. The words of Psalm 23 are words that our psalmist believes were written for a moment such as now. And I believe within it has one of the greatest metaphors ever written in any language when it says, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. The psalmist in our tradition explains that the psalmist was probably writing about the you of God. It could be. I believe that God's love is big enough to take all of our sadness and anger and challenges. But I more so believe that the you that the psalmist is writing about is the you that you need at this moment. The you of the reminder that you're not alone. The you that we need, and we know that while we walk through these valleys of shadows, that we are not alone because we have community. We have togetherness. We have family. We have the way that we come together this morning. So as we recite these words together, I pray that you're all able to find the you that you need at this moment, and even find the ways that you can be that you for someone else to help them through these moments, to remember that no one is alone. So I invite you to join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now our Jewish tradition can only give us a window and a shape through which we can enter into these moments of memory. But the true sacred obligation that we have in Jewish tradition is to remember the life that no longer physically lives in this world, but lives forever in our hearts and our stories and those pictures that we replay in our minds, and from hearing these stories. So it gives me a sacred privilege and honor to be able to invite forward one of Jerry's daughters, Susan, who the rest of the family has ceded all of their time to her, from the woman from North Carolina, to share in these reflections and these memories.
In my father's best tradition, I apologize ahead of time for being a little long-winded. I know it's cold out. I'll read quickly. I have a lot of notes. Bear with me. We gather here today to celebrate my dad's life because, as he told me last week in no uncertain terms, he was so appreciative that it was an unbelievably great one. And he doesn't want a lot of tears. Now, he told me we could all cry a little, but not a lot. Very clear on that. My dad's beginnings in South Philly were very, very humble. And in fact, there's a possibly apocryphal story that after my grandparents closed their luncheonette in the evening, my dad and uncle and my grandparents lived on the second and third floor. After they closed in the evening, that there was a rousing nightly crap game in the back room to pay for my dad's and uncle's bar mitzvahs. My parents met when he was 17 and she was 14. And he took her to his senior prom. And then he didn't call her for 3 years. Then, as family word goes, he called her, and thankfully, as he was finishing up his pharmacy rotations, they reconnected, and the rest, as they say, is history. While he didn't have much of an example to go on, my parents' love story has modeled for all of us what a happy marriage looks like for over 63 years. I'm not saying there were no hiccups along the way, but after so many decades together, it's still amazing to see how much they truly adored one another. The same unconditional love was passed along to Karen and myself, and through Micah and I to our daughter Chandler. Don't you cry.
I'm not. I'm laughing.
You're laughing. Okay, that's okay. My dad inherited a few wonderful, and to be honest, a few perfect traits from his mother. But the best of all was his love of connecting with people. He loved talking with people. And while my dad might have been called a yenta, he was never a gossip. He loved taking care of people more than anything. This made his career as a retail pharmacist really a perfect fit for him. My dad was the kind of business person whose prices were low across the board, and he didn't do that to get people in his door. He did that to make certain his customers could afford to buy what they needed. He knew he, quote unquote, left money on the table, but said he needed to be able to sleep with himself at night. He refrained from comparing himself to others. My dad really was a mensch. He gave untold numbers of kids their first jobs. Some of you are here. And was always tickled when he would see these same kids 30 or 40 years later and to hear them say, "Oh my gosh, working at Buckley's was the best job I ever had." He was proud of Buckley's success, not for his personal accomplishment, but thrilled over what that accomplishment was able to provide in lifestyle for his wife and children. We went to the theater, we went to concerts, we traveled. We never had to worry. You might have worried a little, but we didn't have to worry. And these were things that he never, ever could have dreamed of as a kid in South Philly. My dad was generous, some may say to a fault. And he often violated that old adage, and he violated that age-old adage and often lent money to friends, and sometimes he actually got paid back. My dad was a risk taker within reason, which led him to opening Buckley's with 2 young children at home under the age of 5. We often thought of the store, as we always called it, as his 3rd child. And while we're on the topic of risk taking, my dad enjoyed a bit of gambling, but made certain that we knew never ever to wager more than we could afford to lose. This extended to his legendary Tuesday night poker games, of which I know Karen has, but I also have 2 vivid memories. One is that the guys all called him Mother. I was the only one with 2 Jewish mothers. And number 2 is all the incredibly colorful language Karen and I learned on those Tuesday nights, because we would lay down on her bedroom floor with our ear pressed to the vent.
I've done that.
Right through to the game. We heard everything. My dad laughed and cried with abandon. Crying was reserved for funerals, and at the end of sad movies, laughter was never ever reserved. One of his most defining traits was his sense of humor, and his really greatest joy came from making other people's belly laugh. But the jokes were never ever at someone else's expense. Karen, Chandler, and I also inherited, through my dad, what we refer to as the Bubby gene. You all might refer to it as a little bit of OCD. There never has been, nor will there be, a time in my life when I'm slicing a cucumber without hearing my dad over my shoulder saying, "Suze, the slices need to be a little thinner." No, not tissue paper thin. No, they need to be even. Forever and ever. Most of you know my dad liked to offer helpful advice, solicited or not. And while it sometimes rankled, it always came from a place of a deep-seated desire to take care of everyone and make certain they were happy. His world-class ability to micromanage everything around him made him worry about who was going to keep score at the Friday night card games when he wasn't here to do it. It also led him to dictating 10 solid pages of notes to me last week, which were, as you can imagine, very specific, and they began with, "Karen, when you pick up chicken salad for Mom, please do not get her more than 1/4 pound, and it can only stay in the refrigerator for 4 days." He also left a few specific notes. To Chandler, "I thoroughly enjoyed our conversations about the future you're building for yourself. Please remember Grandpop's rules. Number 1, you must always have cash tucked into the back of your wallet. Number 2, no tattoos, please." Although he admitted this really was your decision at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's true.
Number 3, no drugs. And number 4, no talking on the phone while driving. And please remember how much I love you, sweetheart. I am very, very proud of you. To Michael, I'll make this short and sweet. You have only 2 words to remember to say forever and ever.
Yes, dear.
And Michael, I love you. To Karen, I am so sorry I drove you nuts, or as your sister would say, batshit crazy. I hope you can forgive me and remember how very much I love you. And to Mom, this is the part where I try not to cry. By now, you've probably looked through Dad's night table and found the anniversary and birthday cards he chose for you for this May. You know he spent over 20 minutes selecting cards with just the right sentiment, and he needed for me to tease you a little bit because he really felt like you spent maybe a minute or 2 choosing his. He knows you think he moved you to the apartment to be ready for this day and be with all the other widows. I know you guys talked about this. He said to apologize for all the times he tried to teach you to play canasta his way, and that it really wasn't fair to you because you're a damn good card player. Most of all, even though after 63 years he still made you absolutely nuts. He could not imagine having spent his life with anyone else. You know just how much he loved you. No matter who you talk to, when the topic comes up, or who we talk to, sorry, when the topic comes up, Karen and I would hear the same words every single time. We love your dad. Every time. Nothing warmed his heart more than to know he touched others. And finally, my dad kept a list. On the little table where he sat in front of the TV, there was a list for years and years. And the list had maybe 40 or 50 names on it. And it was friends he had lost over the decades. Karen and I thought, and my mother thought this was the most morbid thing in the entire, we were, the list, have you seen the list? And we thought it was so morbid. And last week he said to me, or explained to me, that it wasn't morbid in any way, shape, or form. He would look at this list and he could look at each name and remember the really good times he had with these friends. So, the list is in the coffin with my dad, so that when he gets to heaven, he will know who he needs to look up. He'll have a good kibitz. He'll get up a great poker game because most of the guys are there waiting for him. And he wanted me to say that he loves every one of you, and his final parting words were to tell you he's just resting his eyes.
Beautiful.
That's it. I made it through.
Susan, thank you for those beautiful words and those beautiful memories. Within our tradition, we do believe that there's something else after the physical world in which we live. Something called the Olam Haba. And certainly may our memories and our prayers be with that great poker game. And may they all be our own memories as we continue. The great character Job, in the biblical book given his name, we say, Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God gives and God takes away. Blessed be the name of God. As a Jewish community, we're very well, unfortunately, acquainted with these moments of grief and these valleys of shadows. We get these gifts of life, and unfortunately, their physical elements are taken away. But the thing that we have is our strength of faith. The thing that we have is the memories, the stories, these reflections that we take into our hearts and to make them our own. So I invite us now to take a few moments in silent reflection as we offer up our own prayers, our own memories, our own words that live deep in our hearts as we reflect silently. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, Adonai, our God, and to that we say together, Amen. Maya Angelou continues to write, when great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence. Their senses erode beyond fear. And when great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, and sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory suddenly sharpens. When great souls die, our reality bound to them takes leave of us. Our souls dependent upon their nurture now shrink. Our minds formed and informed by their radiance fall away. And when great souls die, after a period of peace blooms slowly and always irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses restored never to be the same. They whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. In the Talmud, the great collection of Jewish wisdom and law, we learn that each human life is like that of an entire universe, existing, being, and so vast that we can truly never comprehend just how broad our influence is in a multitude of ways. Though it is in death that we begin to tally the entirety of life, it is in death that we begin to, the death of someone who was important to us, that we begin to see how much that influence of that life was on us. Which brings us to a moment like this one now, when we know that none of the words or thoughts that flood our mind are right. We are never really for death, even when health has been declining. We are never ready for these feelings of pain and this amount of loss, this confusion and all of these emotions. Nothing that we can say possibly makes sense, even though we may have been expecting this moment for a while. Like our ancestor Aaron, who stood silently dumbfounded at the death of his 2 sons, we gather here this morning confused in our words, struggling for meaning, and consumed with the sadness of our beloved Jerry. The last few days have felt like a nightmare, and we've all waited to wake up and find it all just a terrible dream. But sadly, this is not a dream. This moment is real. It is true that we will soon awaken from the darkness, but for now we are consumed. No matter when a death happens, it is hard. So what can we say? Why did this happen? What are the right words to ease the pain for those of us who are gathered here today with our cracked open hearts? For now, there are no words, because there are not many. While we do not have answers to the myriad of questions that flood our mind with confusion, what we do have is our sacred memories. We do have the stories of this great person. We have the stories that Susan just shared. We have the memory of a life fully lived. We have the memories from friends and family and from his perspective on life and living itself. What we do have is the inspiration to be the kind of person and friend that Jerry was. True reflection of that being as many people who are gathered here this morning. I wish that I got to know Jerry a little better, because the memories and the stories that I have heard revealed to me a truly amazing human being. A person who was dastardly funny and fun, but never at someone else's expense. A person who loved to talk and to simply just be a good person. When I asked Jerry's family to tell me a little more about him, I heard one of the most amazing responses. Susan simply said to explain her dad all he needed to do was to look in a Yiddish-English dictionary, because there, next to 3 words, you would most likely find his picture as the shining example. He was a Yenta. But not in that gossipy kind of way. Rather, just he wanted to hear your story and talk to you because he cared. He was a kibitzer because he loved to talk and talk to anyone. And finally, the shining picture next to the word mensch. Because at the end of the day, he was just a truly profound good person. And it was not just from his family that I heard about these specific attributes. It was from everyone who told me about him. While Jerry and Ellen are no longer officially part of our Orami community, are always part of our family in my book and in all of our books, and loved by so many as we're all gathered here today. This is a true testament of a life well lived. And I have to say to all of you, I think Jerry was right. He was right because he was dealt that pretty great hand in life that he kept talking about. But from the stories that we hear and the memories that flood our mind, we can see that all of this is true, not just his perspective. His joy was to bring joy to others in some way, whether bringing joy and laughter by teaching his very young, like 5 and 8-year-old daughters to shoot craps one Saturday night, or to simply share his loving thoughts and opinions on how to make your life better, whether it was solicited or not. Jerry lived the way that he loved, with passion, compassion, and hope. And to me, one of the greatest things that we can remember about Jerry and his way of living, that we can take from this moment and be our inspiration, relates to something that I'm told that he said and expressed to others. He believed fully that you should not compare yourself to others, because you will always be enough. Now, while I'm not sure that Jerry knew all of the really neat stories from our Talmudic tradition, that it is as if he was channeling one teaching that relates to those very moments and that very sentiment. Because there's a really neat moment in our Talmudic tradition where the rabbis of yesteryear try to determine what questions God will ask when we reach the world to come. Those moments right before he sits down at a poker game. while it is believed that you'll be asked 5 questions, it is the last one, and I think the most profoundly important one, that sums up Jerry. The last question the rabbis believe you'll be asked is, were you everything that you could be and not try to be somebody else? To Jerry, simply the answer is yes. To Jerry, this was true. From the stories and reflections of his personality to the way he lived, he was truly himself. There was an openness and a presence. He would give advice that was helpful. He would listen when you just needed to talk. To Jerry, it was how you treated people. And it was about bringing a love of life and living to those with whom he came in contact. And if you were loved by him, well, it seems that was the greatest gift that he gave. I asked Ellen for how long the two of them were married. And while the first jocular answer was 287 years, because that's how long forever felt, the 64 years together is what love is, what we can see as a testament to how not just to believe in love, but to live it as well. Jerry's Menschlichkeit, his way of living, reminds us too of that another great teaching. It is believed that there are 36 righteous individuals in the world at all times. Since we do not know who these people are, our tradition teaches we're supposed to treat everybody as they are these special people. Like yesterday we talked about those angels among us. These 36 people are referred to as the Lamed Vavniks, the Hebrew name, the numeration of the number 36. I have a feeling that Jerry was in fact one of those 36 walking among us because of truly how much of a mensch he was and the great person he was in living, and now becomes for us as a sweet, tender memory. So we face our morning with strength today that Jerry has not left us in vain, rather he has left us with inspiration. The life that he lived is certainly worthy of our reflection, and today amidst that sorrow and the sting, the metaphoric honey and the sting, the comfort of family and friends, and the gathering of our hearts to where we look for comfort, we pledge that all that was good in his life can become greater in his memory. So we ask, what can we do that once we leave this place that can mend the emotional tear with which death has left us raw? I believe the answer is twofold. The first is by turning to faith, our faith in one another and our faith in humanity. But also something that is the legacy that he left for us, and that is by living through our actions and not just our words. Be the example that he was to so many. Be the mensch that he was to so many. Because we have the ability to live with compassion and love. We have the ability to love one another, to be with one another, to support with one another, to laugh with one another, to kibitz with one another, and simply just to love. None of us can explain why certain things happen in our lives. Sometimes pain just begets pain. But I know there are lessons to be learned and ways to be inspired even when we are in the darkest of places. A great lyricist and prophet once wrote, "Sometimes people leave you halfway through the wood. Do not let it grieve you. No one leaves for good. No one is alone. You are not alone." This is why I mentioned earlier that I believe the words of Psalm 23 are so profound and powerful. Because what the psalmist is writing about is the you that you need at this moment. Because no one is alone in a time of need. And so as we prepare to leave this place and move forward in our lives, I invite you to take to heart the words and thoughts of the great Israeli poet Yehud Amichai, who writes, "And now I must leave again. I must return to the cycle of remembering and forgetting. Farewell, we will meet someday." And you will. May our love for Jerry be embodied in our love for one another. And sadly, while the sun is set on his life physically here in this universe, the sun rises now forever in our hearts and in our memory. It is now our sacred task to remember, to live, and to continue to be and be better, for he existed. Fro salinu sukat shlemecha. May the sheltering canopy of compassion and love be with us from this day forth to the next. We say together, Amen. In a moment, we're going to rise and hear the ancient words of El Melei Rachamim, and then we will join together in the words of the Mourner's Kaddish. Before we do that, those who are in the direct mourners are wearing a black ribbon on their clothes. This black ribbon is called a kriya ribbon. Kriya means a tear, because it is an outward expression of how we feel on our inside. Our tradition explains that upon hearing of death, You're supposed to tear the clothes that you're wearing and wear those for the first 7 days. In modern times, we symbolize that with a black ribbon that we wear for the first 7, if not the first 30 days, for the first 2 periods of mourning. For those who are wearing this ribbon, do not despair if you forget what article of clothing they're on or they fall off. Do not despair. Call us. We have more. It is a symbolic gesture and a way of sharing how we feel on our outside, as we feel on our inside, on our outside. But we all feel that same feeling as well. So I'm going to invite you all to repeat that words from the workbook of Job that I mentioned earlier, and those wearing the ribbon to then take a moment and to tear that ribbon. So repeat after me. Adonai Natan, Va'adonai Lakach, Yehi, Shem, Adonai, Mivorach. God gives, and God takes away. Blessed be the name of God. I invite you to take a tear up the ribbon. The words of El Malay Rachamim are beautiful and profound in that they're one of the few prayers in all of our Jewish tradition that doesn't praise God, praise for the soul to be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. May Jerry's soul be bound up in that bond of memory, be sheltered under the canopy of compassion. And I invite all those who are able and willing to please rise as we hear these words. El Malay Rachamim, Shokin Bamromin, Amsem Enokanekona, Tachat Kenfei Hashkina, Im Kedoshinu Torim, Kazora Harakia, Mazkirim, Et Nishmat Yakirenu Shahalach Lolamo. Baal harachamim yistareu b'seiter kenafav lo'olamim. Vayitwor hachaim et nishmato. Adonai funachalato. V'yanuach v'shalom al mishkavo. V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our dear Jerry, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. To that we say together, Amen. To remain standing, we prepare to join together in the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Words that never once mentions death, that only mentions life and the sanctity of God that gives life. We remember, we reflect, we join together in these words as we remember the life of our dear Jerry. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah v'yalma tivrach kirotei v'yamlik malchutei b'chayachon u'v'yomechon u'chayei tekol beit Yisrael b'galau v'zman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah v'borach le'olam almei almaya yitbarach yishtabach v'yitzma'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitzadar v'yitzaleh v'yitzalal shemei nekudasha v'richu Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata ta'amiran v'yalma v'yimru Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chaim aleinu ve'el kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. Oseh shalom v'ramav v'yaseh shalom aleinu ve'el kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen. And source of peace and peace to all who mourn, comfort to all who are bereaved among us, as we sing together. Amen. Be seated. In a moment, I'm going to invite forward Jerry's immediate family to place some symbolic earth and some symbolic dirt on the casket itself. This is a symbolic gesture, a way of taking that sacred obligation that we have each and every day to escort our dead to their final resting place. It's an act that is entirely selfless and that we place this earth on the casket itself as we prepare to leave from this place. The other sacred obligation that we all have upon leaving this moment is to have food. We always joke within our Jewish tradition that the end of all life cycle events, it ends with food. But the reason is because we take these moments, these memories, the sustenance, to continue these memories and these stories from this place as we move through the valleys of shadows. And incidentally, there's no calories in food after a funeral. Trust me, I'm not a doctor. But by gathering here and gathering our broken open hearts, we have these moments of being together to offer that strength, to be able to find those moments of passion and compassion. So after I invite the family to come forward to symbolically place this earth, if there's anyone else who would like to participate in this ritual, it is an opportunity, it is not an obligation. You can come forward and very gently take either a small shovel or a fistful of dirt and place it lightly on the casket itself. The casket itself will be lowered once we all leave out from this place, and we'll then move forward through our moments of grief and sadness. If anybody else would like to participate in this ritual, please be aware the ground is a little uneven and there is a board here, so be careful as you go down.
No, you go ahead. I don't want to go with it. You go. He's in Florida. I'm coming.
I gotta go away to town. No, you told Harvey's gonna make sure you get your car down long. I told him that, so I gotta go. All right. Drive carefully.
Just kidding.
I have to do it.